This is the European edition of Breaking Banks, the world's #1 fintech podcast and radio show. We bring you the European unicorns, startups, founders, regulators, and leaders innovating the rapidly evolving fintech scene today. A truly localized podcast with both English and local language content, with some of the world's most well-known hosts and influencers in the fintech sector globally. Join us every week as we explore what makes the European Union a phenomenal proving ground for many of the fastest growing fintech plays in the world today. Okay, let's roll.
Hey guys, welcome back to Breaking Banks Europe, episode 218. I'm here with my good friend Janine Hirt, CEO of Innovate Finance, for an ecosystem zoom-in episode on the UK. Incredibly enough, we haven't done that yet, but Janine, very welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Matteo. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
My God, this sort of between us goes back so long ago. I mean, okay, so first of all, let's do it properly. Janine, please give us a little bit of background that I know so well, but the rest of the 2 million auditors don't.
Absolutely. I mean, you actually were there essentially at the beginning. So Innovate Finance is the industry body for UK FinTech. We launched 10 years ago. So this is our 10th anniversary of Innovate Finance. And we represent all of the innovators and those that are really trying to transform financial services for the better in the UK. So we're a membership association. We bring together the early stage companies across all FinTech verticals, like your more traditional plays, such as P2P, FX, transfer, et cetera, but also cyber, reg tech, insurtech, and everything in between. And then we have your big name companies, so the Wises, Revoluts, Monzos, Zopas, Thought Machines. And then in addition to that being our core group of members, we also have some of the larger financial institutions at the table, like Barclays and Lloyds and JPM, who are looking to transform for the better. And then we bring some of the big tech, such as Google and AWS and Apple as well to the table, and professional services firms to help us drive thought leadership in the space too.
So, now I'm going to say something that you're going to laugh and agree and be very proud about. I think that every other fintech association on earth is an Innovate Finance that didn't make it.
Oh, well, okay. Well, we hope they do make it because we want to see real change. But yeah, I think we've been really lucky over the years. We've had, just since we started 10 years ago, we've had an incredible team and we've had amazing members that are driving this innovation in the UK. So really, It's really fantastic. I feel so privileged to be a part of this ecosystem. Yeah.
So 10 years ago, 2013, that was the year that I left Swift. But before then, remember very clearly, what you guys are at Level 39. As you remember, well, InnoTribe was the first tenant of Level 39. I think Level 39 was what, like 2010, 11?
Yes, I think they're a year. I think it's their 11th anniversary this year as well. They're doing some great things. Yeah.
Of like 1 year before, right? Exactly. So Innovate Finance sort of came to take the natural cradle, of the fintech that was Level 39, back then. And I like to think that everything else sort of came afterwards, this idea of creating a community, putting everyone together. And incredibly enough, before this call, I was actually speaking with is another alliance. It's called the Digital Alliance, focused on emerging markets. And the challenge of all these ecosystems is to get enough means and money and backers to be able to act. Because, I can name you right now 15 African associations that can only work with volunteers' job. And they are a catalyst, for innovation, but they have very little means. So, what do you think is that like timing or what was the star alignment that made Innovate Finance so successful?
Well, it's a great question, and I think I would really point again to the phenomenal ecosystem that we've got, and also the passion of so many entrepreneurs to really showcase the positive impact that fintech can make. But I also think it goes back to 10 years ago. So much of what we were doing at Innovate Finance, and I was part of the leadership team then as well. So much of what we were doing was about promoting this positive impact and talking about how these players who were new on the scene, who were driving competition, who were driving choice, were creating a better financial services sector that worked for everyone. And now, actually, where we are is you have these players who started out as small organizations. And then you've got Revolut, right, which started out as a small organization 10 years ago. You've got the Wises of the world. You've got, the Monzos, the Zopas just charging forward on so many different levels. Now the conversation has matured. So we're actually looking at how can we shape a policy environment that is conducive to innovation while still protecting the consumer. Because what we don't want to do is stop some of this great innovation and great technology, which has the benefit of transforming financial services for the positive. We don't want to stifle that through regulation. But at the same time, we need to ensure that consumers are protected. So a core part of our work at Innovate Finance now is actually advocating and lobbying on behalf of the disruptors and on behalf of the fintechs. And we responded to more than 45 policy consultations and government consultations just in the past 12 months alone, which are looking at all different initiatives and all different priorities for the sector. So whether it is around how do we ensure that our regulator has competitiveness as their secondary objective, to looking at how can we ensure we have a challenger first mindset when we think about banking, and making sure that challengers are given the opportunity to continue funneling money towards the SMEs that are very much the growth factor of this economy here in the UK.
So I think that, and I'm pretty sure that you feel it, on your shoulders. You have like the responsibility of being like the initiator, of so many initiatives, and also like an entity and an ecosystem that inspired a lot of other, countries and environments and ecosystems to grow, and even to simply to get set up. How do you help them? I'm actually curious about, because I remember that back in the days, you guys even set up a global organizations to gather all this, and oh my God, I said, what a titanic job it was, right? I wonder whether or not, or how do you deal, with all these ecosystems? What what system of communication you have in place? How do you interact? Because it's a fascinating story, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, on the global point, so, when we had a scenario back a few years ago called Brexit, which really required us to also ensure that the UK ecosystem was as strong as possible. So for a few years, I would say we had a bit more of a more internal focus on our domestic market. And then 2.5 years ago, we launched something called the International FinTech Group, which we co-chair with the Department for Business and Trade, which is about helping our UK fintech firms expand on that global basis. And so it means we are working with hubs from around the world. We're collaborating with some of the big trade associations, trade shows as well on an international basis. And we're also encouraging fintechs to come into the UK and use the UK as their scaling destination of choice. Now, Innovate Finance also has just launched about a year and a half ago our US program. So we have a person on the ground in the United States, because our members have said this is a market we're really keen to scale into, and we'd like your help. There's no one like Innovate Finance there at the moment. And equally, we are trying to drive more investment from the United States into the UK. And I'm sure we'll talk about investment in a minute, but we're in a pretty good place in the UK, but it can even be further than that. So having this person on the ground in the US, we have regular activities in the United States to drive appetite from US investors to come into the UK, and also, again, encourage those US fintechs to scale into the United Kingdom as well.
So you made a good link on what the next question was about. So I know very well how was the beginning of the whole story, and the UK ecosystem was lucky enough to attract not only some of the best talent back then, but also some of the most spectacular, funding rounds that Europe back then and now the whole ecosystem, has seen. In the past years, of course, there were a little bit of contraction because, for a bunch of good reasons. Brexit is one of them. COVID is another one, by the way. Let's not forget about it. How do you see right now, currently, what's the climate right now? Because I think I also do believe that you guys are sort of the crystal ball of whatever happened next. So
I wish I knew. Where are we going to be in time?
Exactly. So for the good or for the bad, we can see that some of the dynamics that are happening in the UK are then reflected as a ripple effect in other ecosystems. So, I'm curious, maybe you can give us some good tips.
Yeah. Listen, I'm really optimistic, actually. And I think we're in a strong place for UK fintech. Now, if you look, let's take investment for a moment, because we all know that 2023 was a very difficult year, not just for fintech, not just for financial services. It was a difficult year for every single industry, every single sector. And we have a significant cost of living crisis that we were all trying to navigate through. But even despite this, we still had a really strong showing for UK fintech in terms of investment. So we were second in the world behind only the United States. Once again, that's a position we've been in almost every single year. We received more than $5 billion of investment coming into UK fintech. And to put that in perspective, that's actually more than all of the rest of Europe combined. So really significantly ahead. We are the European leader. We are a global leader, second only to the United States. I would also add that although we did see a drop from 2022 to 2023, we are still seeing higher levels of investment in 2023 than we saw pre-COVID era for the UK. So the trajectory is still very positive. I think there's an argument to be made that there is also a maturation of the sector happening in tandem to the economic climate as well. And even when we look back to, say, 2016 and the referendum, 85% of our members had wanted Remain, right? We put a survey out, and the significant concerns were primarily around access to talent and access to investment. Now, both
if you do this survey again, what do you think the result would be?
So this is the interesting thing, because from 2016, we actually have only seen investment tick up. And it's gone up and up and up. So those concerns were mitigated slightly in the coming years. And I think also the work that the government has done around scaling visa, is also really critical in terms of getting that access. And now we need to make sure, because it's a big year, 2024, we are likely to have we're likely to have an election coming forward, a lot around the government. So this is a big year. So making sure that we have the pathway to ensure that we maintain the UK's leadership is really, really important. And so Innovate Finance has put out a manifesto at the end of last year, essentially giving some of this roadmap for what government has to do, whoever is in power, to ensure that we retain our leadership. And we've also actually just launched something called the Unicorn Council for UK Fintechs. And that is bringing together the CEOs of all of the UK unicorns and the Soonicorns together to really look at fleshing out what are the biggest asks to make sure we keep growth companies here.
Send some of these unicorns my regards and ask them if they remember when I correct them live when they won the InnoTribe, and I'm thinking of,
Pretty sure they will, Matteo.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I'm pretty sure they do. So, like a question that I'm pretty sure that everyone who is an entrepreneur or a potential entrepreneur would love an answer and some clarity. Actually, not many people know about FinTech Stage, my own company, and the one who actually brought Breaking Banks into Europe is a UK company, and is like 8 years old. Back then was extremely easy, of course, to set up a business there, et cetera. Now, as a European, with an Italian passport, how, like, realistically speaking, more complicated it is to set up a business in the UK as a startup, as a tech startup, whether or not it's in fintech. But I don't think it makes much difference, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I actually think that the government has put in place processes to make it relatively easy to continue starting up firms. And if anything, they've gone sort of even more in trying to ensure that we have in the environment here for both early stage companies to stay. I think it's also important to remember that we have one of the top university sectors in the world here in the United Kingdom. So quite often you get graduates that come out that really want to start companies or they want to go into growth companies. And so having that pool of talent is critical. And we've seen progress around making sure we can keep that type of talent here on a domestic basis. There's also the argument around the fact we need to drive our domestic pipeline of talent from a much younger age, and which is why we have a FinTech for Schools program as well, to really raise awareness and financial literacy amongst younger people, because I think that is an area we can progress and move forward on too. But I would say, listen, we've got a great ecosystem here, both of entrepreneurs, of investors. We have supportive regulators and proactive regulators. Now, this is an area we want to ensure continues because we've seen, of course, there's some hesitancy in looking at new technologies and making sure that it is being regulated in a proper way. So we think it's critical that industry is giving that information, that intelligence, and working and collaborating with the regulators, that we continue to have that proactive environment. But all of that combined with a really supportive government has enabled our sector to thrive. And I think that's the case for small companies and for high growth companies. But we need to keep going because we definitely can't stand still or we'll lose that title.
I want to double click, Janine, on the talent aspect, not only because it's a topic and overall a track that I'm super invested in, but also because I'm curious about out of the 650 million digital talents that needs to be upgraded in the next few years, like McKinsey is saying, and it's always the argument that. For my talent projects in Africa, I bring on, right? Because most of these talents, not every data scientist can cost $10,000 a month. It wouldn't be sustainable for the economy. And since you are in a critical position in the ecosystem, and you see, all these requirements, the need for upskilling, how difficult it is to find the right talent, for some of these fast-paced growth companies. So what's the talent situation right now? I mean, it's because one could think, okay, if you are able to pay expensive enough, you will find someone, but that's not sustainable, right? So how do you see this particular market?
Yeah, I mean, listen, it's a great question. And actually, if you had asked me 2 years ago or 18 months ago, I would have had a completely different answer than I have now. And I'll give you some color and some insight into that. We have, on a regular quarterly basis, we bring all the CEOs of the high growth fintech companies together for a dinner. And I usually ask them what's keeping them up at night, what's on their mind. And about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, we had a session where actually every single person in the room said their biggest challenge at the moment was talent. And it was getting the right talent, getting the right people into their companies, getting the tech talent. But actually, there were a lot of other areas. So looking at things like sales and the marketing side was really core too. Now we have the conversation, and actually no one around the table is mentioning it because what we are hearing is they are able, especially at high growth companies, to bring in that talent. I think the pool of talent is slightly different. And part of that is, unfortunately, a reflection that some of the large techs have indeed shed talent. The large incumbents have shed talent. And so the pool here in the UK is bigger than one might imagine. That's not to say it's easy, but it's a different scenario than where we were 2 years, 18 months ago. We still need to make sure that we are driving access to that talent, both domestically and internationally, because that is so core, as we know, to continuing to grow successful companies. But at the moment, the pool seems to be a bit bigger. That may change on a relatively quick basis, who knows? But at the moment, it seems that it's a bit easier than where we were maybe 2 years ago.
That is super interesting, Jenny. It's incredible. I actually didn't think, but it was so logical. When you look at the Amazons or the GAFAM, of this world that are letting people go, that's a sort of a treasure mine. Is gold. For the startups that have incredibly skilled people that are coming from that knows about technology. that's coming from they're not coming from an old dinosaur, financial institution. They're coming from companies where they know what working hard means, etc., etc. So yeah, and because like all the GAFAM, they have a huge UK presence. This is where naturally the talents get recycled, right?
Yeah. And I mean, there is one area that we're working actually very closely with some of our partners on, and in particular EY, around the governance landscape, which is around making sure we have proper boards in the UK. And that can be a challenge, finding the right people for your boards as you scale and as you grow. So that pool is something that we want to really develop. There's so many people in the ecosystem that actually would serve as great NEDs, as great chairs. So that type of training is an area that I think there's a big opportunity for our market here. And it's also really important that we bring NEDs from this domestic ecosystem. They can be international from all over, but that they're based here is important, because then you have a likelihood, or a stronger likelihood, of listing within the UK, which is an area we want to really see progress in the future.
So since you just invited me and I just said yes, I think that it would be like nice to finish up talking about the 10th year anniversary of Innovate Finance Summit, right?
Yes, Matteo, you're going to be there, which is number one reason that everyone should join. Come on, that's number one reason.
Okay.
Yes, we are 10th anniversary. We're actually, rather than looking back though, we're going to look forward. So we want to say, what are the next 10 years to bring, right? We've seen the impact fintech has made. We did a great report last year with Accenture that looked literally at assessing and quantifying the positive impact fintech has had against the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. So we know that fintech is transforming financial services. We know the big heavy hitters. What does the next 10 years look like? So where is fintech moving beyond financial services into other industries? What is embedded finance doing to the sector? What is AI, the impact that's going to have on the overarching industry? Where are we going to see the next unicorns come out from? And for the current unicorns, what are their biggest priority areas at the moment? So we've got a lot going on. It's 2 days. It's at the Guildhall on April 15th and 16th in central London. 2,000 people from all over the world, C-level executives, government, industry, and regulators as well coming together. So please do join us. And you can buy your ticket on www.innovatefinance.com. There's my plug.
What a nice wrap up for this conversation. That's amazing. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much, Matteo. It was great chatting with you. And thanks so much for inviting me.
And guys, see you at the Innovate Finance Global Summit. Oh. And it's also a wrap.
Thanks for listening to Breaking Banks Europe, a Provoke Media podcast in cooperation with FinTech Stage. Don't forget to tweet us out, shout out, or post to the team at Breaking Banks EU on Twitter. If there's something or someone you'd like to hear on our cast, let us know. See you next week on Breaking Banks Europe.